All right. Thank you everyone again for coming to today's webinar on finances and mental health. I'm going to be the moderator for today. My name is Frank Allgood, and joining us today we have Glynis, Donna, and Tara, who are all going to be part of the conversation today. So for starters, I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So just give us a little bit of a background on yourself, your practice, what you do, how long you've been doing it. And let's start with Glynis.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. As Frank said, I'm Glynis Rennels. I'm a licensed clinical social worker in Lafayette. I'm currently in private practice, which means I see clients for therapy. In my office, I've specialized in, I guess you could say trauma treatment, but also like associated things like anxiety and depression. I have a couple of different modalities that I tend to use for the most part that kind of covers those things. And also really looking at things like life transitions, sort of adjustments to stressful events and things like that. Before being in private practice, I worked in the mental health field in the facility-based services. And then prior to that, I worked in nonprofit agencies. So I kind of come into this with a lot of different perspectives because all of the different clients or communities we served kind of all had, different perspectives, but the themes and the underlying issues were very consistent.
Very good. And I already butchered your name. And how many times did I try and practice it and I butchered it again? My apologies.
Either way, it's fine with me.
Donna, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Donna Oquint. I'm a medical psychologist and I practice in Lafayette. I've been practicing for about 25 years. Like Glynis, I started off in agency work. I worked for about 6 years for the Office of Mental Health. And worked with the region, doing a lot of program creation, contract monitoring, and division of administration of services. So I, for the last about 20 years, have been in private practice. I see clients who present with a number of different reasons: ADHD, depression, anxiety. I do court-ordered psychological evaluations and prescribe medication. So that's pretty much what I do.
Excellent. Thank you. And then Tara, you are with Maple. So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Maple.
So Tara Bro, technically I'm the VP of operations here at Maple. I just recently celebrated my 21st year with Maple. Started off as a teller. And have learned a lot about all the different ins and outs of the credit union and fell in love with credit unions pretty much from day one, and wouldn't want to bank anywhere else. I just think credit unions just do it a little bit better. We do it a little bit differently and we do it a little bit better. I think part of that example is gathering here this evening for this conversation. So thanks again, Frank, and thank you both, Glynis and Donna, for being a part of this.
Awesome. Great. So let's start off with a question of how do mental health challenges typically impact a person's financial decisions and behaviors? I think there's a lot that probably plays into it, but let me ask the experts. So whether it's Glynis or Donna, take it away. Draw that connection to us for mental health challenges and financial decision making.
Jump in on that one. So I think that it depends on the symptoms in terms of how your presentation or the way that you interact with money might be. For instance, someone who's really depressed might choose not to engage in the activities that they should be engaging in. They might not be checking their balance in their checking account or paying their bills. They might just sort of choose to ignore what's going on because they're really too depressed to take care of their activities of daily living. Someone who's anxious might use spending to soothe themselves. I think that most people have heard of retail therapy. So if you're feeling anxious or bored or lonely, you might engage in overspending as a way to comfort yourself. So I think that it can affect you in a number of ways. You know, avoidance, overspending, are two of the ones that come to mind.
Got it. Glynis, anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two excellent points, and probably, a couple of the main things that we see a connection with. I would say another thing that comes up is sort of shame, the feeling of shame around money, which can contribute to both anxiety and depression. And that could be, feeling shame about whether it's being in debt or not making enough money, or feeling like you can't keep up with other people, either friends, neighbors, family in your life, or even like seeing what's on social media and what's portrayed in that way. And I think that a lot of times those feelings about finances, or confusion or shame about not understanding a lot or not being able to save money, those may be kind of situational, but it also may kind of go back in time to like how we were raised and what we learned, or what we believe about money and finances, and financial fitness around, from our backgrounds, our stories, our parents. And then I guess another way that I see it come up is, a lot of people have told me they've grown up seeing their parents fight over money. And so it's part of that avoidance that Donna talked about too. Like, talking about money is dangerous. It's like, if I can't talk to my spouse about money because it'll cause a fight. And so it ends up being creating relationship issues as well.
That's a very good point. And let me piggyback off of what you were saying. FOMO, fear of missing out, right? I think there's a lot of, it's a very real thing. And there, of course, there's also that mindset of keeping up with the Joneses, the Jeffersons, the Joneses, right? So walk me through that a little bit, particularly when you're talking about I'm terming it as a root system, where you learn things as a kid. And of course, you see movies all the time where people talk about it goes back to my parents, but it kind of does, because how you are raised can impact how you manage your money. Right?
Sure. I think, I grew up with one of my parents worked, the other one didn't until I was a teenager. And, I grew up with this idea that there was almost enough, but never quite enough. And so it kept me from, asking for things. So that's just one example. So now I can actually see that play out in my life now, even though, things might feel different to me. I still have that little inkling of, oof, that's too much. Oh, I shouldn't buy, whatever. And to be honest, sometimes I shouldn't. It's not that, anything is okay, but it can skew your opinion of that. But how that, I think, translates into mental health sometimes is someone taking care of themselves in the right way. And it's not just about buying, clothes or cars or anything like that. It's like, I need to get to the doctor. I need to get to the dentist. I need to, do some basic things. And that is, that kind of comes up from our history and what we learned about money. But on the flip side of that, it's been said that comparison is one of the root causes of unhappiness. And so when we live in a society where we're bombarded by images of how, things that we need to have to be happy, then it's like, I sometimes there's this real conflict related to, I don't have, I can't afford to go to the doctor, or I can't afford to take care, buy things that are healthy for me. But at the same time, I want all this other stuff. And it just creates a real conflict. And I think that does contribute to anxiety. And then possibly, as Donna suggested, like some overspending, or, trying to self-soothe through it and not really addressing like, what are the basic needs and what do I need to take care of myself and my family?
Yeah. Donna, you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting that as we go through school, we're not really taught about financial literacy and how to create a budget, how to create financial goals, and figuring out a plan to cover for your necessities and for emergencies. So if your parents didn't really talk about it or teach you about that, you've missed out on some important lessons. So yes, family of origin can shape. I think really that's where we primarily get that kind of education is from our family. If we didn't have it, you're just trying to figure it out on your own, unless you're lucky enough to have, maybe some assistance from someone like Tara, like at a credit union, kind of holding your hand and teaching you these things. So I wish that there was more that was being taught in school about, finances, how to manage finances, and certainly more in the family unit as well.
One of the things you touched on, Donna, that got me thinking is, and I'll just use my own self as an example, right? You can have a bad day, you can have a real bad day, and you can say, you know what, I'm going to treat myself. So I'm going to go right into that McDonald's drive-through because I had a bad day. But then at the same time, I could justify and say, you know what, I need to reward myself, and I'm still going to go into that McDonald's, right? Which is one, not healthy for me from the food that I'm consuming, but two, it's probably money that I shouldn't be spending. I should be spending money on that home cooked meal. So walk through the psychology of why am I doing this? And what are some coping mechanisms I can prevent myself or anybody who's listening to do that sort of thing?
That's a really good point. I think that we often say things like, well, I had a rough day, so I deserve this, or I'm going to go ahead and treat myself. And an occasional treat is fine, but I think it's important for you to think about, what are my financial goals? Is your emergency fund set? Are you trying to save some money maybe for a vacation, a family vacation? Are you trying to save money because you know you're going to need a new car? So if you have those goals and you're very intentional when you're out and about, you've had a rough day, and you're thinking, you know what, I'm going to go and get a latte. I'm saying the latte because I'll talk a little bit about the latte factor, as a treat. But then just to step back and think, wait a minute, how important is this? Is this consistent with what I really want in terms of the goals that I've laid out? Is there another way that I could treat myself? Could I go home and make something that's equally yummy, but that's not going to cost $5? So I see someone writing, I have done that before. Absolutely. It's I think we all probably are guilty of treating ourselves. And it was something that I read with David Bach. He wrote The Automatic Millionaire. He talked about the latte factor, where a lot of people are spending maybe $5 a day on a latte, but if they were more intentional, and these same people would say, I don't have any money to save. But if they maybe would even just save $5 a week and, make progress towards those goals, you wouldn't even notice it really, right? That's the latte factor. What are some things that you won't even really notice that aren't super important, but that you think that you want or deserve? So it's sort of delaying gratification instead of, okay, I'm going to treat myself right now. It's recognizing I'm working towards something bigger, and I'm going to save that money. I'm going to go home and I'm going to have, I'm going to make my own latte, which is probably a fraction of the cost, and then save that money towards my goals. So those were the conversations that I enjoyed having with my kids when we were out and about when they were younger. And all right, guys, we can get a treat right now, but remember, we're also trying to save for a vacation. So what do you think would be better? We could go home and eat ice cream, or we can pick up ice cream that's a lot more. And typically they would make the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great if they did. Now I need tricks on how to make sure that I get the right decision and not the constant whining, That's
But that's part of creating the goal together. So if everyone is on board, like, hey, we would really like to save money to do whatever, right? Or maybe it's they're asking for a swing set. And I didn't sugarcoat it. I would say, this is how much a swing set costs. So we have to make some decisions as a family. Do we have everything that we need taken care of? This would be an extra. This isn't something that we need. It's something that we want. So kind of talking with them early on about what we need versus what we want, and then making sacrifices. So then they're looking at, oh, do we want to save money, which sounds so boring, or do we want to get a swing?
right. Make it exciting. Absolutely. I like that. So Tara, working in the credit union space, I know you have worked with many, many different members in many different circumstances. And so I'd be curious from you if you could just shed some light on conversations that you may have had when it comes to these types of things, particularly like we were just talking about with Donna. Someone comes into the office, to the branch, and they're experiencing financial difficulties. How do you kind of coach them through to make better decisions?
So I actually had a thought that I was hoping you were going to defer to me. That idea of setting goals. I think that sometimes we're not even aware that we don't have goals. That I feel like sometimes, and maybe for myself as well, I'm not just speaking of, pointing a finger, that I'm just going through my daily, got to pay the house note, got to pay the car note, got to get groceries, pay the insurance, that the idea of even having a goal for an additional savings, I wouldn't have even thought of it. So sometimes I think we just need to be able to open up that, hey, let's set a goal. Is that goal $50 by the end of the month? Or is it something bigger for the swing set or whatnot? So kind of a first step often for our members is to give us an opportunity to have a conversation with them, come in to the credit union and just sit down, and then we can kind of open up, and we do have budgets that we can kind of help, kind of a template to set a budget, because sometimes that's not even in someone's vocabulary right now. Like Donna was saying earlier, we're not getting that kind of education early. So sometimes our members don't even understand, what do you mean by a budget? What does that look like? So to sit down and to try to, let's talk about what are the things you have to pay for every month. Is there anything left over? What can you do with it? And again, let's start small. And then you can build on that, and it rolls into that small savings, rolled into a bigger savings, to then maybe you've got a down payment for a car even sometimes. So
Yeah,
got to start somewhere.
And this is where I think we separate Maple from a lot of other financial institutions, because when you go into Maple, you are interacting with, how many financial counselors do you have?
Ooh, we're not all, but it's a big number. Pamela, you're going to jump in and tell me how many we have at this point?
It's a big number.
That must be big.
7. 1, 2, 3, probably between 5 and 7, I think is.
Yeah, I think it's 7 or 8.
So here you are, you have 5 to 7 certified financial counselors who can walk somebody through, versus perhaps some of the other financial institutions where they don't have anyone certified, and they're most likely not going to be wanting to sit down and talk to you. They're just more interested in helping you get a loan if you have really good credit. They're not there to listen to you. So tell me a little bit about how you tackle things with empathy, Tara.
So empathy is, to me, being able to walk with you, sit with that person. We have often, I know in my office, I know Pamela's done it before, I know my lenders have sometimes done it. We step away from our desk and walk around and sit next to whoever's in my office, because I don't know what you're going through. If you can't tell me, I can't fully help you if I'm not aware of what is happening. So sometimes that's our biggest obstacle if I'm trying to assist someone with that financial crisis at this moment, is I don't know the whole picture. And so sometimes they just have to let us in a little bit more, so that we can try to, steer them in the best ways.
So
Can I just make a comment here? Sorry
absolutely,
to
I was
interrupt
ready to
you,
go right
Frank,
to
but I was thinking as you were talking, Tara, about setting goals, and some people need to like be educated. They can set a goal, and to accomplish something, you set a goal. And if it's not done early, as Donna suggested, I think that part of it is a mindset about money. And some people come into adulthood thinking, maybe other people can do that, but I can't. I will always be in debt, or I don't make enough money to save money, or whatever those negative thought processes are about money. And a lot of that does come back to our childhoods, how our parents handled money, if we were educated or not. And so just having a listening professional say, hey, listen, you can do this, we can help you with it, is enough maybe to shift the mindset into a more positive belief system, like, oh, okay, well, maybe this is accessible to me as well. And then be able to kind of move into then the how to do it, and with the help of your financial counselors, or the guidance that you provide. But I think that's where it kind of comes back into the idea of if it's not, mental health per se, but the emotional charge that money takes on.
yeah.
Money matters. Yeah.
So let me ask you this. What are some, and this, I kind of go back to one of the things that you had talked about early on, which was talking about healthy financial conversations among spouses or partners, right? That can sometimes be a major thing. But what are some either tips or things to maybe look out for, particularly if you're in a relationship, where you can pick up on some things that makes you wonder, are they aware of what they're doing, or they're trying to hide something? Is there anything that you can offer in terms of how to communicate better when it comes to finances?
Well, I think that couples can have the conversation about, like, what was the money, like, kind of almost like what was the culture in your household about money management, saving, spending, etc., that you experienced growing up. I think that a lot of things have changed when we went from, pen to paper management, like when we had a checkbook and wrote things down ourselves and kept up with it on the balance of that checkbook register. Like, I'm old enough to remember do it. I did it myself. I still do it, actually. But when we move into like more electronic banking, it's almost like it took this whole level of what would be like participation off. So you can look at your app, you can see your balance, but you almost are like a spectator at that point of what is actually happening with the bank account or your savings account and stuff. And so I think that, like, getting back to your question, couples talking to each other about just sort of what was it like for you? Did your parents talk about money? Did they fight about it? Did they always tell you, no, we can't afford that? Because those messages it's really important to teach our children about money and what can be done with it, and what, shouldn't, etc. But it's tricky, because if you are telling your kids, and again, I'm just speaking for myself, this is how I grew up. No, we can't afford that. No, we can't afford it. Then I grew up thinking we couldn't afford anything. But and I know that now that wasn't true, but it was like I didn't even ask for anything. And it also, just depends on like where you are in the family. I mean, I was number 6 of 7. So, I feel like all of the extra, stuff went to older brothers and sisters who were more involved in other activities. And by the time I was, kind of remembering things, they were in college, and it was just, my dad was paying a lot of money to, wherever they were going. And I just felt like, okay, well, I'm too young. I don't need anything. And that's kind of how that translated. So I've heard my own children say, when they were growing up, they're all young adults now, but I've heard them say, I wanted to go do this, the such and such thing with my friends, but I didn't even ask because I know we can't afford it. That made me think about what are we communicating to our kids? Sometimes we could afford it, sometimes we couldn't. So it was like we didn't have enough open conversation about it up until that point. So I think when parents hear stuff like that from their children, as a couple or partners, that's a good time also to enter into what are we saying, what are we doing, how is this impacting our children? So it's
Yeah.
kind of like talking about the past and then some of the current things, if that's what the family situation looks like.
Yeah, and of course, there's the opposite, right? Where we are afraid to say no to our kids,
Oh, right. That's a whole other, extreme there.
no to our partner, right? And so we kind of go down that road. So
In terms
definitely,
of couples, I like to suggest that couples ask each other, what are your values? What's important to you? Where do you like to spend your money? And for there to be some agreement about, well, how are we going to make sure that what we need is covered and that we each have some money so that, we can do whatever's important to us. So it might be important for a woman to get her hair or her nails done, or maybe it is important to have a latte. But I think that those kinds of things need to be communicated. Whereas maybe the husband, it might be important, to spend money on some fishing lures or to be able to go get a new pair of tennis shoes, what have you, right? But for each partner to say what's important to them and then to have that built into their budget. So like, these are the things that we're going to spend on that we know that we need to spend on. And then you're going to be able to spend X amount of money on whatever it is that you want each month. And that way you don't become, I guess, frustrated or angry with your partner. You've already talked about it. You've agreed upon what you need to do. And then each person has what I call discretionary money, fun money. And that way it's together, we're creating this plan.
Donna, did you look and see the new pair of tennis shoes that I just bought?
I did not. Did your wife approve of them? Do you have a wife who who monitors your spending?
No, she didn't. But if we talk about relationship dynamics, right? Like, I'm one who I've been wearing the same pair of shoes for like 2 years, to the point where they're actual tennis shoes to play tennis in. And I needed to finally buy them. I'm that frugal in a sense. Now, my wife, on the other hand, not so much. There's Amazon packages coming on the stoop all the time. But yeah, I finally got to a point where, in my mindset, yes, I need to kind of go ahead and make that purchase. Her mindset is, it's always arriving on the door. Like, what is our Ring camera showing me now? So it's a very good point.
And that's the thing, is we all have differences in what we value and what we want to spend money on. So I think that there needs to be more communication and more sharing about what's important to you.
So let me ask both of you. We are in Mental Health Awareness Month, and I think it would be fair to say that, particularly coming out of COVID, which, believe it or not, that was what, 2019. We're in 2025 now, so it's amazing that it was that long ago. But I think the subject of mental health has come a long way. However, I also still think there's a lot of stigmas surrounding it. In fact, right before we started today, I had someone come by who actually works much like in your profession, and he was talking about programs that are available at people's place of employment. And that's what he does, is he's trying to get people to take advantage of those types of programs. So walk me through, how does therapy and counseling play in someone's journey? Of course, there's the financial side. We can touch on that, but just as a whole, I imagine it's probably better off coming to you than going to TikTok and looking at the latest influencer to tell me how I should be living my life. So please delve in a little bit about, what is it really like to be able to get therapy from you guys?
Glynis, I'll let you start because I do primarily medication management.
Medication, okay. Yeah, it's that's a very big question. I would say that a lot of people come into therapy, whether, and again, this is kind of across the board, I think, but they are looking for someone to talk to. I mean, it's kind of as simple as that. It's like, I may not have anyone in my life that I can either open up as much as I need to them. You know, I may be nervous about speaking about how I really do feel depressed, or there's something bothering me and I can't figure it out, or maybe it's my relationship and I really have a hard time talking to my partner because I don't have the the skills to do it. We always end up in an argument or somebody shuts down, and there's all these different scenarios, but I think primarily people come to counseling to have someone to talk to. And a lot of times, people are just looking for someone who is easy to talk to, someone who looks like they can just lend the ear. And that is why even at a credit union, for instance, it's like, I know that you're not mental health counselors, but like that may be why somebody opens up to you, Tara, or one of your staff, because you're just obviously open and, somebody who they feel like they can trust. So I guess that's probably the primary reason that somebody initially decides they want to go into therapy. But as you start talking, you start to realize like a lot of what I may be struggling with now, like if I'm the, hypothetical client, comes from either certain situations or my history of, any number of things. Obviously, it could be, in my case, I see a lot of people who are trauma survivors, but it's could be just, difficulties growing up, maybe having been bullied as a child. I mean, there are infinite number of reasons. And so, I feel like my job is to, first of all, just build some kind of trusting rapport, just some kind of relationship where this person can open up, and then we go from there, as far as like what kind of interventions, and I use the word intervention, it's kind of clinical, but just, kind of like what approach can we take that will actually help this one individual. There's no one size fits all, obviously. If somebody comes to me and I am concerned about, the severity of, say, their depression or their anxiety, I am going to ask them what are their feelings about medication, for instance, or at least something to help them kind of through that immediate moment. Now, I'm not necessarily going to call it a crisis, though sometimes it is, and so it's like, well, okay, well, have you considered some type of medication? I'm not a med expert, so I would refer to somebody like Donna to say, hey, we can kind of team up on this, work, coordinate care that way. And then just kind of planning a course of action. I think that, again, referencing back to what Tara said, sometimes I guess it's just, it applies to all walks of life. Some people don't realize that you can set goals and like, what are my mental health goals or my emotional health goals? What are my self-care goals? I'm allowed to have goals? Wow, that's a new concept, and so like, okay, so where do you want to see yourself? Sometimes I ask this question of, picture yourself waking up at some point in the future on just an average day, nothing special going on. But the difference is that you are kind of where you want to be in your life. What does that look like? Just a simple question like that opens up possibilities for like, I can maybe then move from this point to there in my life with some help and support.
Very good. And Donna, since you mentioned medication, tell us a little bit about the stigmas that people have about medication and why. I bet you so many folks have this mentality of what they think they know or what they've learned watching movies or whatever, that they have an idea of what medication could do or not do for them. And so tell us a little bit about that. How do you combat that? How do you help people find what's right for them?
I hear a lot of people struggle with shame or guilt. that they shouldn't have to take medication for depression or anxiety or irritability. And I usually ask the question about, hey, if you have like some kind of fever and you go to your doctor and they discover that, it's a sinus infection, they prescribe antibiotics. Have you ever said, I feel guilty, I shouldn't have to take this? And they always say no. And they're just not viewing a mental health illness as consistently important or debilitating as a physical ailment. And I'm quick to point out, most people can push through, a sinus infection, but we're pretty quick to take an antibiotic. And really, some people can just get over it without an antibiotic. But depression and anxiety are really, in my opinion, way more debilitating than a sinus infection. And I'll ask them about that, like, how painful is this for you, this depression? Sometimes they're lacking in terms of taking care of important areas of need, like paying bills, and there are serious repercussions, or their relationships are impaired because of their mental illness. And so when I point that out, that the impairment there is often greater than what you would even have with a physical illness, I'm usually able to move the needle. And just because we don't have a blood test for mental illness, we do believe that it's, for many people, there's a biological or a neurological component. Yes, now lots of people will just experience stressors or have maybe, loss of a loved one or a divorce, and it's just environmental. And those are typically not the people who need medicine. Some do, because they're going through a stressor and they've been that greatly affected. But there are many other people who really, truly are struggling with a mental illness that's not just the result of an environmental stressor. So that's the discussion I like to have with them.
Very good. Very good. And Tara, let me ask you in a similar vein. I imagine you see people, or you don't see people, because they are afraid to open up about their finances. It's so easy to sometimes just apply online or do things, click a button, because if you reject me, it's just a computer. If I come to you, it's a face-to-face rejection, or I fear I will be rejected. But I imagine that's not really the case at Maple. Even if you're not able to help them, you still find a way to help them. Right, Tara?
So, of course, we make every effort. And you're right. If someone is not open to having a conversation with us, they're not going to respond to phone calls. They're not going to respond, if we're asking them to come in. If I send a text message, they might respond to that. So that in itself is just a little bit of a barrier at times. But I've actually almost just lost track of what I was trying to say about it. So forgive me.
At the end of the day, it's a matter of you're always open to have that conversation, and people need to be aware of that.
And a lot of times, if we've got someone who, I know where I was going with it, sorry, thank you. Say we've got someone who they've got a car financed with us, okay? Job changes, maybe they're down to part-time, maybe they lost a job. Well, they're not making payments anymore. We're trying to reach out to see what's going on. They're avoiding our calls, so then they get behind. We're trying to help them. We often say, you got to tell us what's going on. I can't help you if I don't know. I don't want to take somebody's car away from them. How are they supposed to get to work? How are they supposed to get children to school? Those kinds of things if I take your vehicle away. But you got to talk to us so we can try to come up with a plan. We got to have a goal. We got to make a plan to be able to move forward. And so usually we just try to tell them, you've got to let us know what's going on. If you avoid our calls and conversations, we can't help you. I can't help you if you don't talk to us.
Yeah. And that's the ultimate thing. It gets back to communication. It gets back to opening up, being a little bit vulnerable, and understand that for each one of your cases, you're there to help them. That's the end goal. So
Frank, can I just offer a super quick personal story here? As long as
go right ahead.
I probably do a little too much self-disclosure, but say my family went through a situation last fall involving one of our children. And when you said be vulnerable, like that was exactly what I felt like. And I know both of these ladies here at the credit union know exactly what I'm talking about. And we went to them and said, hey, you know, because we have, you know, car loans and things through the credit union. I mean, that's what it's for. And they helped us out so much. It wasn't an easy conversation. And it definitely wasn't easy. You know, my husband and I had to talk about it. We had to go present it to them. But it was a lot easier in the end being honest and open about it and making a plan than it would have been if we hadn't and things got out of control. So I can personally testify that that is very true with Maple Federal.
Awesome. Awesome.
Excellent.
It takes courage, and what I think we often find is, I've heard the saying before, so you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but 90% of what we fear isn't accurate. Something to that tune. Where like in most cases, the worst case scenario never happens.
Mhm.
So I think that's very, very good. All right. What is one actionable tip that you can offer today if someone is feeling overwhelmed about their finances, feeling anxiety, concerned about their mental health? What is one actionable tip that you can give someone today?
I'll start with one. I would say start small and come up with, we talked about goals, you know, so many times, maybe come up with a very small goal. Set yourself up for success, something that you know that you can succeed in. If you've never put aside money or, you know, kind of saving is something new, commit to $1 a week, right? I mean, something that where you know you can meet that goal and commit to it. And then I think once you see that you have that momentum going, you can build on it from there. So start small. Don't get too caught up in that this isn't meaningful. Start to build the momentum.
Excellent. Glynis?
I think building momentum is super important. And again, I totally agree with that, starting small. And I think that when we notice, like if it's okay, set a goal of save $1 a week or $5 a week or something small like that. If we start to feel resistance, like I just can't do it, then it's kind of like, okay, so then what is this? What am I feeling right now? Where's this message coming from? Because, you know, there's that also that old saying, pay yourself first. And I truly believe that that is true. It's part of that goal setting, like making your plan, setting that, you know, little bit of money aside every week or every month. But I think that what happens is we these old messages of money and our mindset pop in, and then it's like, oh no, I can't do that. So really examine kind of like, what is this thought true? Or is it just something that I think that I believe, but I can actually kind of kind of circumvent that and do it anyway.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting close on time, and before we open it up to any questions that any of our participants may have, I would like to just kind of offer kind of final thoughts. Anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to add to our discussion? Just kind of open it up to all three of you. Any final thoughts? We covered a lot.
We
Yeah.
covered a lot. I
Very
would
thorough.
just say, I think this is such an important topic because money impacts everything in some way. And I say money, financial management in general, because it affects how we feel about ourselves, our self-esteem, lack thereof, what we feel like we're doing. Can we take care of our families? You know, it's very stressful. Just buying groceries, just paying our car insurance, you know, the basic things. It's very stressful. And no one is in it alone. You know, it impacts all of us, even, you know, people who make what you would consider really good living and should be able to do all these things. Everybody is stressed about it. And there's a lot of stress also just about kind of, you know, what's going to happen in the world, in our country. And I think that some of that is kind of falls into that. Just because we can imagine the worst case scenario doesn't mean it's going to happen. We have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remind my wife all the time when she gets in some of her fits over what's going on in politics. What do you actually have control over? That's what you have to worry about.
So true.
All right. Is there anyone online who would like to ask a question? I'll open it up now if you have any questions you'd like to ask our panelists.
So
All
how
right.
about I add one thing in here?
There you go, Pamela.
So, Glynis, you talked about what was the culture in your family about money and how important it is to teach our kids about money. One of the things that we talk about in financial counseling is being honest with our kids. So if I'm in a solutions role and I'm talking to someone maybe that's past due, I'm asking about, what they're spending their money on. And then when they'll say, oh, that's my kid. And then I'll say, hey, have we been honest with your cutback? Or did you say that some bills came up and it's a really tough time? How would you suggest families open up those conversations that aren't going to terrify their children, but bring them into the conversation that they're part of the resolution?
I think that is a great question, and it's very difficult to answer in terms of like how to do it. I think talking with children about, obviously like what's happening in the family and kind of like going into a conversation with, these are some things that are that we need to talk about, but the parents need to be kind of as even as they can be. Like, this is the facts, these are our plans. We want to know what you think. Would you guys rather work towards this goal or this goal? And that may be delaying, a purchase, but instead they may maybe shift gears into doing something a little different in that, in that immediate future or something like that. I'm seeing the giving kids options, that it wherever possible, that's always a great idea. That was what someone put in the chat here, because it helps children feel less anxious. It helps parents see that, hey, kids sometimes do have really good ideas, or they really are capable of understanding more about what's going on. And as long as we're all kind of in this together and no one is left unheard, that goes a long way for overall communication within the family, whether it's financial issues or otherwise. Being heard and having your feelings validated is just, sometimes that's all you really need to do. That's the biggest part of it.
Very good. Got any more, Pamela, in your back pocket?
I always have questions. I will tell you this, Donna, you mentioned about financial literacy being so important. We don't do enough of it in our education system. There is currently HB 52 by Representative Matthew Willard that's on, I think it went to the Senate floor yesterday. So hopefully there is someone that's going to take up this pillar and get that planted, because it's time for Louisiana schools to get financial literacy education out to our students.
That's great to know. I did not know that. Good.
Yeah.
And to all students,
Absolutely.
there are, sometimes depending on what track someone takes, there's a little bit more of it. But I mean, it doesn't matter what your ultimate educational career plans are. Everybody needs that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
For sure.
We talked a little bit, I think Glynis talks about shame, keeping up what we see on social media. And I think that is such a big part of what people So I think of our members, when I see some of the things that they're doing, trying to keep up with what they see, like the perfection that people see on social media. I don't know what's the magic to make them, anyone, see the difference between, we can all blur out what's not pretty about ourselves, right? And show the best. And, we need to understand that there is also the reality behind, the pretty picture, what people see. So how would you encourage someone to kind of look beyond that facade?
I have an attorney friend who calls Facebook fake book. And she said that it's interesting how some couples will make it look like they have the best relationship. Happy anniversary to my amazing husband, or what have you. And she said, it's crazy. Like, then, like, I know that they're going through a divorce. What is this? Why are people creating this facade? And it is interesting. So I think that we all need to just be mindful that what we see in social media is not necessarily reality. For the most part, it's not. People are highlighting what they want to highlight, just like you said. There are a lot of other components to it that we don't know.
And as you said earlier, Donna, I mean, focusing on values. If you have a conversation with someone about what do you really truly value, a lot of times they kind of shift into that versus, oh, I want the big new shiny thing. So yeah, keeping it real in that sense too.
We see lots of lavish vacations, new cars, new houses, and lots of toys. And they probably don't air out when they're having trouble paying for things.
Right.
I'm not going to be on this. So,
Which of course I have several neighbors of mine who are ready to get rid of all these campers that they bought during COVID, in the height of COVID, right? So, yeah. Anything else that anyone wants to add? Any other questions for one another? All right. Well, I'm going to ask our panelists to stick around, as well as anybody else who's online, for kind of an offline conversation. But thank you all so much for participating in today's panel. For everyone who attended to view this, I hope you got something out of it. And of course, if you would like to connect with either one of our wonderful panelists, we'll certainly get you in contact with them. Just reach out to Maple and we will make that happen. So with that, we're going to call it a close, and thank you all so very much.